Oof. So that last chapter, geez, I remember going to see Toni Morrison give a talk at the New School, and she had been introduced not biographically by some presenter, rather four or five writers came up and read a piece of hers. I thought that was so baller. And this one artist, woman, writer, lady, she had chosen to read a sex scene from Toni Morrison. And I don't recall the book, but I remember the scene. And it was so vivid. And she had even given a little teaser in the beginning. She said that is so hard to write about sex. And then she reads this glorious master class in how to write about sex by Toni Morrison. And I had that very vividly in my mind when I wrote this Alida scene with fireworks and the palms to the wall and ish. I don't know why I went for something super abstract. Maybe because I thought that this relationship with Alida should have been, it was up in the clouds. I don't know, something like that. It wasn't corporeal, except for the part without the rubber. So, anyway, after such intensity, the next chapter is more of a, it's more of a mechanical chapter, just sort of laying some plot groundwork for the later tragedy. But I like it. It's in Paris, and it starts off like this. Chapter 5. Elsa and Alida had rattled many must-see recommendations. So many, in fact, that they had to write them down on 3 sheets of notebook paper, 5 bar coasters, and a torn cocktail napkin with an impression of the Luxembourg Garden water fountain sketched by Elsa's turbulent hand. In honor of these tipsy suggestions, Rick declared we would cross off the pubs first to make our debut in the City of Lights, dans la rue Mouffetard, with a drink or 3. The neighborhood flanking La Rue happened to lay a mere handful of blocks from the homely and diagonal 2-story hotel that Rick and I had settled on during our first backpack-strapped wander of the city. When we had told Elsa that we were going to roam the city until settling for a cheap room near La Gare de Lyon, she had scoffed in our faces and tried to upsell us on a shinier Cartier. We won't spend any time at the hotel, we had replied, or waste time booking something last minute. Rick had told Elsa to quit getting distracted and to keep writing down more bar recs. Alida would meanwhile play with the thigh under the table, with my thigh, but I ignored the hand over my pants to focus on Elsa's hand, the strange way she held the pen between her middle and ring finger, like an animal. I probably thought about Elsa longer than I should have, imagined she and Rick getting together, and realizing that hadn't happened when we woke up the next morning past checkout. We had to sprint to La Gare du Nord in Bruxelles, with Rick half undressed behind me and his backpack strapped across his chest, stuffing socks inside of it as we ran. That's the problem with getting involved. You overthink. A weekend fling. She needed the distraction too, I thought, though I should have said something to Alida, not just left her like that. But what exactly, I didn't know. I didn't mention it to Rick on the train to Paris, or as we scooted for a spot to spend the night. He wasn't clean-cut with a mustache anymore. His face looked like a full-on coral reef. Not even 1 week into our summer abroad, and it attracted the sharp glance of many locals, baguettes under their arms. "A 2-star!" Rick had shouted. "And La Rue!" We sat at a plaza and sipped on blanche beer before a performance of Life, the Sunday market, played by Les Parisiens and set to 6-story buildings. Artisans were packing trinkets into carts and boxes. They bickered with one another over who had sold the most trifles. Between them, modern couples were making out, arguing, making out again, either sitting down or walking. It didn't matter. Les petits enfants were running around selling the scraps of a profitable weekend, broken toys, plastic jewelry, etc., while a street trio made a week's worth of living, plucking a warm contrabass and a bright electric guitar, and the third musician being the hat that jingles on the ground. The air tasted crisp. There was something traditional, habitual, calm and steady about the closing of the third act upon the city. It reminded me of why I liked France, why anyone likes the Bleu Blanc Rouge. Habiter, vivre, to be here, to live. I remember thinking, is why I studied French in college. Rick and I had actually taken the first semester of French together, but after that he stopped, switched to Spanish. I kept going, took an intensive 2-for-1 course because I couldn't decide if I wanted to take class Tuesday and Thursday or Monday, Wednesday, Friday, so I picked all 5. Rick, on the other hand, was less francophile than the Parisians, and never breached its language requirement. A small detail that didn't bother him too much. His phone rang. It was his mom. He snuck a peek at his screen, then cupped his phone with both hands, faking a toss. When the call went to voicemail, Rick smiled at me and said he was traveling. He stared up at the sky in a state of unusual serenity. I don't answer phone calls when I'm traveling. I wonder if traveling comes from the word travail. False cognates. I took a hit of my beer. Unless traveling was hard work back when the word got invented. Then another hit. By the way, your mom wants to say hi, that's all. Rick frowned, counted the bubbles at the bottom of his glass, stared back at the sky, but couldn't find the same serenity he had enjoyed only a second ago. So he settled for a view of the street musicians, the passers-by. Our waiter leaned against a column, smoking a cigarette. Every time she calls, Rick said, is to tell me to finish those Spanish classes. But I can take those online. I don't want to be in school another year. I've got studio session dates and sound production work I'm waiting for, and I'd much rather do that than take more classes. You could take a class this summer, I said, if you go back to Austin. And then you can swell up for the fall, work while you take the intensive 6-credit course, and get it done. It'll suck, but at least you'll be finished by the new year. And then Megan can throw you a party. Rick ripped off the label of his beer bottle and threw the chunks into the ground, into the crowd. We were quiet for a while. Then, in English, Rick called our waiter over and asked for another round. You aren't going to finish, are you? Rick took the long last hit of his glass and set it down. I'm almost convinced I don't care enough to graduate. I matched his hit, set my glass down. What you got going on that's more important? Those one-off, part-time gigs? I can hop freight trains, he said, or play here in France. Why not? There are more clubs in Paris than in Austin. Might even go straight down to Spain, learn Spanish the real way, with the Spanish. Plus, look at you. You took French in a classroom. What, all through high school and in college? And you've said it yourself, you're still not comfortable speaking. Because I don't, I mean, parce que je n'ai pas cru en moi. Moi-même. Rick shook his ponytail, took another hit. You know, he began chuckling, and loosened his hair, tied it back up. I might just go straight to Spain after tonight. You should come too. I laughed, remembered Alex. What about him? Rick asked. We gotta stay in France. Fine, we'll stay in France. Avec les Français. Avec les Français. If I had figured he was half as serious as he sounded, then I would have noticed this was the beginning of Rick's ultimate decision to roam the old world forever. But because I rarely took him seriously, I didn't push the issue or convince him otherwise. Mostly, I didn't want to drag the mood down by bringing up school anymore. So I kept my mouth shut, like I had done the entire day, and thought about her instead, until it was my turn to get the next round. When the bartender approached us, He put out his cigarette in our table's ashtray and asked us if we wanted another round. We did. I ordered in French. Lol.